Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Alpha's Arcane Bride. Episode 10. Dulsanra a demon. Those words rang in my head. I felt sick. Those things didn't exist on this earth, did they? Well, the little dark creature they had vulgar plans for wasn't exactly what they wanted. They wanted a male demon to breed with a witch. Sadly, they ended up with a female demon. Yet they weren't going to drop their plans, so one of the sick members who found the demon rather appealing decided to engage with it. Janina looked disgusted, but I felt worse. Was that what I was? A thing born from asterisk? I wanted to be sick if my past had been crap before, it was worse now. I stayed rooted in my place, trying to calm my emotions as I listened to her. How do you know if it was just a few who were in on it? Rayhana asked sharply. I could feel her anger as she stood up and walked closer to me but stopped next to Rayhan, whose emotions were a storm right now. I didn't want to look at him. Not when he had an idea of what I was, yet he didn't tell me. Did he want to deny it? Did he not want to acknowledge it? Because it was my filthy brother who did the act. Janina snapped with irritation. My eyes flew open as I stared at her. Wait. This woman was. She looked at me and sighed heavily. Yes, despite the fact I'd rather not be associated with the Silver Line, I am Samson's elder sister. She said coldly. I felt dizzy, gasping when a pair of strong hands wrapped around my wrist. The sparks that rushed through me told me it was Rayhan. So, once they realized the demon was pregnant, they were rather excited about their sick plans. However, when the child was born, it was more witch than demon and they were disappointed. Hence, you were shunned and considered a failure. She said bitterly. I didn't know what to think of it, I was just a sick experiment. Despite the fact that my mother was a demon, I wondered where she was now. Did they let her go? Did she escape? Was she still in their hold? What happened to her? I asked quietly. Oh, well, a demon can't really give birth to a human child. It goes against the very laws of nature. She was dying from the moment you were inside of her. Demons are barely 4 feet tall, she was a small thing. I heard that you were draining her powers within the womb, and they had to use many spells just to keep her alive long enough. Each word felt like a punch to the gut. If Rayhan hadn't been behind me, I would have fallen or run. I always wanted to know about my past, but this? So, she died? Did she? Did she say anything about me? My voice came out barely more than a whisper. Did demons even talk? I don't even know if they had the same intelligence as humans. For the first time, there was an ounce of sympathy on Janina's face. She barely had any understanding. Those creatures aren't really close to human. But from what I heard Reginald, Samson, and Eldridge laughing over, she didn't want to give you up. Even as she was dying, she tried to protect you from them. She may not have been like us, yet she understood the bond of a mother and child. Her words made my eyes sting with tears, and my heart tighten with pain. My mother. No matter what she was, she had been my mother, and she had been abused by those witches. By the coven, all of them. Because those in charge back then should have kept an eye on what their people were doing. The pain inside me was growing. Rayhan's arms wrapped around me tightly, turning and pressing me against his firm chest. I closed my eyes, burying my head in his chest. "And how do you know all of this?" Rayhana asked coldly. "I only found out because I was suspicious of where my brother was going every night. When they realized I had found out, they threatened me to stay quiet, but I knew they wouldn't let me live, especially when I was tempted to tell the elders. Why do you think I'm on the run? They know if I manage to contact any of the others, they could be ruined," she said bitterly. She looked at me and sighed. "There are two sets of witches after me, Reginald to kill me and the coven as a whole to retrieve me in this coming battle. We witches don't have the compassion like humans, we do what is best for us. I am tired of running and you wish to be free. So shall we get back to our lesson? Yet, you really don't have a heart. Give us a minute." Rayhan hissed, turning and leading me out of the cave. I didn't even want to look at him. Was this what I was? A thing that wasn't even human? He stroked my back and I suddenly pulled out of his hold. "You knew?" I asked, my anger flaring. My heart was pounding, I didn't care if I was about to be unreasonable. "I had a suspicion, but does it matter?" he asked softly. I hated this, hated it all. "Yes, it does," I said, turning away, my eyes blurring with tears. "I don't deserve you." A whispered the words that tugged painfully at my heart. A low growl ripped through his throat, he spun me around and into his arms. "Don't ever say that. You're mine, and I don't care what you are, kitten, you re all that I want," he said. His hold on my elbows was tight and our hearts were pounding. We glared into each other's eyes. His anger faded when he looked into mine. "I love you Dulsanra, every part of you, what do I need to do to show you that?" he whispered, despite the anger that I could see in his eyes. I looked away. "I don't get it, if the bond didn't exist, would you still love me?" He clenched his jaw, his eyes flashing green. "Yes. That's not even up for debate. You re my world, and I will get you the justice you deserve. Those witches who played such vile games. They will pay, for everything they have done to you. I promise you that." The wind whipped through my hair, the sea crashing against the shore and the darkening grey skies only seemed to fuel the storm within me. But through it all, his promise held. I looked down, this man was crazy, crazy in love with me. His fingers curled under my chin, tilting it. "One more thing. You are not darkness. If they want to see darkness, I'll show them what that truly means. I've never seen someone who has been through as much shit as you have and is still so pure," he whispered. I grabbed his t-shirt, standing on my tiptoes and crashing my lips against his, igniting a storm of pleasure through us both. His arms instantly wrapped around my waist and we kissed as if there was no tomorrow. His tongue slipped into my mouth, kissing me roughly. I was done doubting everything. I would believe in myself and give these witches a run for their money. Just the way Rayhan was fighting for me, I'd fight for me, by his side. We broke apart, both of us gasping for breath. "You're getting better," he smirked. I smiled coquettishly. "Oh? Is the alpha having trouble keeping up? I whispered, kissing him softly when I felt him groan quietly. You know you will always win when it comes to this game, he murmured huskily. I smiled softly. No, he would always win because he was perfect, my perfect yum yum. I'm ready to give them hell. I said, my eyes flashing with defiance. That's my good girl. He replied, his gaze dipping to my lips. Oh, I wish I could be his good girl and drop to my knees, but now was not the time. Dulsanra night had fallen, and the spell to initiate Rayhana was in place. She was nervous as I walked over to her. It's going to be okay, look, if it worked for me, it will work for you. I whispered. She nodded. Despite my truth, she didn't treat me any differently, and if Hecate was able to expect a demon hybrid, she would surely accept a werewolf hybrid. Janina began chanting the spell, and I gave Rayhana a quick hug as she stepped into the triangle on the floor. The room seemed to still, the candles dimming. Suddenly, glowing symbols spun around Rayhana, her hair flayed as if defying gravity and her eyes fluttered shut. A blinding light appeared around her and Rayhan had to shield his eyes, but I kept my gaze ahead, my heart beating. The symbols seemed to sink into Rayhana's skin, and I smiled in relief as I felt the radiating aura that burned off her. She was a fire witch. A whispery voice fluttered past my ears, and I smiled, catching the word on the wind. Serafina. Janina's eyes opened and she dropped her arms as the candles all flickered. Rayhana looked at us and smiled softly. Serafina. She repeated. Janina nodded, befitting, for it means fiery one. You have the fire element. She looked at us and then at Rayhana. Believe that that is your true name, and with acceptance, try to shift once again. Rayhana nodded. Her confidence made me proud. Well, Rayhan, a little privacy, she said, giving him a look. You sure you are going to be okay? He asked her. She smiled confidently. Please, I'm a Rossi, I'm always okay. She replied just as confidently. He gave a small nod, smirking slightly and turned his back. I did the same and he pulled me into his arms. Once the sound of bones breaking came, I spun back, my heart thudding. Letting out a breath of relief at the sight of the large brown wolf that stood there. She looked at Rayhan and I saw the smile that crossed his lips. You got that right, he said, glancing at me. His smile only grew. She can mind link. That's great, I said, hurrying to the large wolf. I hugged her tightly, she growled softly and I giggled, knowing that it was her purring. Thank you, I heard Rayhan say quietly to Janina. I am only fulfilling my part of the bargain, she replied. I stepped away as Rayhana grabbed her clothes in her mouth and trotted off. I looked at Rayhan, the emotions I could sense from him made me emotional too. I wrapped my arms around him. Thanks, kitten, he said quietly. I didn't need to ask what he meant, helping Rayhana by summoning Janina. I rested my head on his chest. I loved him so much. Things weren't going to be easy for us, not yet anyway, but they were beginning to look up. Although I knew it would be harder from here on out, at least we had got the ball rolling. Rayhan, 3 weeks had passed since we had first been stuck with Janina. The girls were making immense progress. From control to spells, they were pitched against each other, and although Dulsanra's powers were locked away, Janina was teaching her to tap into her other abilities. At will, she was able to shift, and we learned her fire power was easier in this form. Janina also taught them to use their elements without spells. Although Dulsanra's element was not fire, her demon side gave her total control of fire, and hence she was Rayhana's ultimate weakness. Every ball of flame that she cast at her had no effect on Dulsanra, she just ate the flames away. I learned that witches who passed on their abilities did not mean they passed on the same element, just as Rayhana's was not the same as Andora's had been. The woman was an earth witch, but she had resorted to dark magic, more than anything else. Watching the girls grow, focus, and train was impressive. I was sometimes their opponent, but both were women didn't want to hurt, and it frustrated Janina. I even felt comfortable enough to leave them for less than half an hour when I would pop out for supplies or food. I had become an errand boy, but I didn't mind if it meant my mate and sister were getting the help they needed. Getting alone time with Dulsanra was hard too. Sometimes we'd sneak away, but I couldn't go too far either, knowing Rayhana was here and we needed to stay vigilant. But sometimes I needed a taste of my kitten, a kitten who would tempt me more and more daily. I couldn't wait for the day we could get back to having some alone time. Over the last few weeks, I sometimes saw Janina watching Dulsanra with a tiny hint of a smile on her face, but it was rare, and she'd cover it up. I didn't get why she couldn't just accept her as her niece. But it seemed witches had a totally different mindset when it came to family. Speaking of family, Dad said Mom wanted to speak to me. Things had been tough at home. Mom had been silent, struggling with the new news, but I also knew she was in a lot of pain. Mom was very protective and caring. She was reserved around others, but she tried doing her best for them. I know she wasn't perfect, but I also knew nothing was black and white. Mom was the way she was for a reason. Losing some of her closest people to witches had been hard for her. Nevertheless, I had hope she'd come around. The fact that she wanted to talk to me today was a positive sign. The connection down here was crap, so whilst the women practiced, I climbed the cliff, sitting right above them as I dialed Mom's number. "Ya hey Atai." Her soft voice came. My heart ached at how tired she sounded. "Mom, how are you? Not angry with me?" she asked gracefully, but I knew behind her cool front, she was worried. I smiled slightly. "Elle can't be angry with the woman who brought me into this world. You got upset, I get it. I just hope you change your mind," I said quietly. She sighed. "I assure you, 3 weeks without Rayhana, I regret my words, but I'll just need a little time to understand all of this. I will work on it." Guilt riddled her voice. Although she wasn't ready, I was glad she was willing. "Your father said you 3 are with a witch who is helping the girls. Is it true?" "Yeah, and guess what? I haven't even told Dad this, but you can put me on speakers so he hears too." "Oh. What is it, son?" Dad's voice came. "The first night here, the witch who is helping them, performed a certain ritual. It helped Rayhana get in touch with her preordained given name, and with it, she was able to shift at ease. She can mind link too," I said softly. I heard Mom's gasp and her weak laugh of happiness. I hoped it would bring her some relief that, thanks to a witch, Rayhana could tap into her wolf side. Dad chuckled. Oh, now that's good news. This witch is the one that Alejandro and Kiera learned about our history from. He explained to Mom. I see. Yeah, it was going to take Mom time, but we were ready for it. When will you return home? Mom asked hesitantly. Once the girls have learned a good level of control, there are a few important things we need to do before we do come home. I said quietly. Will you be waiting to welcome us home? She was silent for a moment. Of course. I couldn't stop the smile that crossed my face. Then I cannot wait. Anyway, I'll speak to you guys soon. Love you. I love you too, Rayhan. Mom said. Take care, son. Love you and give the girls my love. Dad added. I hung up staring out at the glittering water. The sun was up more often these days. Yet, we had a lot to do before we got back home, unlocking Dulsanra's powers, dealing with the link Andora had on Rayhana. The Coven, we needed to put a stop to them before they attacked. According to Janina, we had under a month. Dad had also told me that Granddad had mentioned the witch hunter group that was attacking witches. He was also going to see if he could get any information from Zion. To think that he may know more about them, maybe even have links with them, made me sick. But then again, wouldn't he have recognized Dulsanra? Maybe not. She was older and healthier now. But still. I would get to the bottom of that too when the time came. I answered a few texts from the girls and Chris, mostly they were just having their usual banter, with Rose saying Chris was becoming a better man. He asked a few times about the training, never once did he directly mention Rayhana, but the way his texts were phrased, it was obvious he was being careful not to. So, I was thinking, should we do something? Like it's been ages since we saw you guys, I'm sure you lot need a break, right? Maybe a barbecue and a catch-up. Rose text. I frowned, I missed them. I guess we could use some supplies from home. I replied. Yes. Lola texted with a string of emojis. I glanced at my phone, seeing Chris had seen my message but he hadn't replied. See you three in a few nights. I text, turning it off. Hoping he got the hint that I wanted him there too. Rayhana too. I slipped it into my pocket, thinking I'd ask the girls what they wanted from back home and tell them to bring me a few charged battery packs. Dulsanra, we were just sitting and eating the food Rayhan had brought us when Janina approached. Over the last few weeks, I could tell she was nothing like Samson. Despite her stoic behavior, she was different. And I could sense her pride when either Rayhana or I succeeded in something. She even remarked that she would be known as the teacher of two of the strongest witches of our time. I think we are ready to do the unsealing spell of your powers, she said, looking between Rayhana and me. She smiled confidently. Oh, I cannot wait. There's no chance that Andora might try to sabotage it? Rayhan asked sharply. No, she can only make a link when Serafina is in an intense emotional state or when asleep. And I will not let her. Rayhana said, confidently drinking some of her J2O. And then, once my powers are released, can I deal with getting rid of Andora? I asked. That was something I was looking forward to, after everything she had inflicted upon us all. Yes, and this time cut off her link completely. Janina said. She removed a necklace from around her neck. This necklace was taken from her neck before she was killed. She had spelled this rock, but it contained her blood. The spell she used upon you, this is the key. Wait, how do you have it? I asked sharply. Or more like, why do you have it? Rayhan asked. Janina raised an eyebrow. I knew she sealed your power, and I foresaw your escape. I knew the time would come when I would need this. She smiled as she stared at the selenite rock, a triumphant look on her face. My heart thumped as I looked at her. So back then, when you asked for the Lekan King to do you a favor in return, it was to help Dulsanra? Rayhan asked. Speaking the words that I was thinking. Ah! Rayhana chimed in. Janina shot us all a cold glare, her deep blue eyes piercing into Rayhana, but something inside warmed me at that. I am only doing this for my revenge, she said curtly. Of course. Rayhana said in a tone that clearly meant that she didn't believe her. It had been tough on her. She had been near tears in the first 2 weeks when she snapped a nail or when couldn't condition her hair properly. Unlike me, she had never lived rough, and although Rayhan had gotten several thick blankets for her, she had awoken annoyed a few nights and saying she refused to sleep. Janina had ended up using a spell to make her sleep simply so the rest of us could rest. I felt bad for her, but Rayhan said it was fine. Over the weeks, however, I saw the change in her. She was so exhausted by the end of the day, she'd curl up and sleep with appreciation. Her nails were cut short and she didn't argue about it. Her long hair was always pulled back and her face was now makeup-free. Although the first few days she would apply some sneakily from the case she had carried in her handbag, she had also settled for some flats. She was trying her best, as was I, and the friendly rivalry we had was fun. Rayhan got possessive every time I shifted and didn't allow her near me. It had gotten annoying, and until I snapped and asked for a reason, I wouldn't have known otherwise. Flashback a week ago, Rayhan. Why do you do that? I snapped. I was shifting a lot easier now and it helped with my powers. He pouted slightly, frowning deeply. Because when you're in that form, you're tempting, to everyone. He said unhappily. My eyes flew open in surprise, and I raised an eyebrow. That was a joke. Very funny, Rayhan. I shook my head and was about to turn away when he pulled me into his arms. I could feel his heart-on pressing against my stomach. It's the truth, kitten. He said, his eyes flashing green, before he kissed me possessively. I knew from his words that he was telling the truth, but it was hard to believe until I had asked Rayhana, and she had laughed and agreed with him, looking a little amused. After that, I didn't blame my poor jealous Yum. End of flashback. Everything had been set up for the spell and I was feeling nervous. I knew the extent of my powers, although it was for fleeting moments, Andora used to channel it and use it herself. I just hoped the teaching I had been given was enough. Just make sure you keep control of your emotions and powers, Janina said. I nodded as Rayhana clenched and unclenched her hands, taking a deep breath. Okay. I'm ready. You girls have got this. Good luck. Rayhan said, pulling us both into his arms, kissing Rayhana's forehead before letting go of her. He cupped my face, kissing me deeply. "This is it." I nodded, my heart pounding. It didn't feel real, this was really happening. "I love you," I whispered. "I'm going to answer that after this spell." He replied with a wink, kissing me once more. Despite his calm and confident exterior, his heart was racing, and he was worried. He kissed me harder and I could only reciprocate it. The pleasure at his touch simply consumed me. We broke apart, breathless. Tiptoeing, I kissed his cheek and moved back. He cast Rayhana a smile, car3ssing her cheek before backing away from us as Janina stepped forward. "Remember, this spell is going to take a lot from us all. I will keep the barrier raised with you two inside. Keep going, even when your body wishes to give up." Janina murmured. She took off the crescent-shaped selenite necklace and murmured a spell, before she was able to turn the tip. She stepped forward, pouring the few droplets of blood that had been inside the rock into the center of the wheel symbol that we had drawn in the center of the pentagon. It fizzled out and she quickly backed away, chanting a spell and sealing us inside. "I will succeed," Rayhana said with confidence. "I know," I said, giving her a small smile. I was nervous, but I had confidence in us. "Let's get this done, sister." She smirked with a nod at me. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, taking my position at the tip of the fifth point of the star, my bare feet touching the point. The blood seeping out of the wheel would soon reach me. We only had one shot because the blood was only enough for one try. We couldn't mess up. But I had told Janina not to tell Rayhana that, not wanting her to feel the pressure that was riding on her shoulders. She took a deep breath, her powers blazing as she began to whisper the spell. I closed my eyes, ready. Rayhana, I would give it my all. I wanted to do something, be more than just the raw sea princess. I wanted to be the best version of myself. Be worthy of more. The pain inside my chest at the loss of someone who wasn't even mine to start with clawed at me every day, so I'll put my all into learning what Janina taught us instead. I missed him, but why? We were nothing. I wanted to show the world I was more. That I was worthy and I would. Even though Andora couldn't interfere, she tried to. I often felt that presence in my head. Now that my link with my wolf had strengthened, she alerted me to Andora's presence, and I was able to push her away. I also knew she would try to interfere with this spell, but I was not going to let her. I began chanting the spell, looking at the woman I considered my best friend now. Although we hadn't known each other for too long, the bond we had was perfect. She was the sister I never had, the friend I yearned for, and I was never going to let Andora ruin this. I would free her from her shackles. I chanted the spell that Janina had drilled into my head, a spell that we ourselves had put together with snippets of different spells. The exact spell Andora had used on Dulsanra was lost, but Janina was confident we didn't need it. Just the way Andora broke the council's seals on Dulsanra, it was doable with a strong witch. I felt my power storm around me, my eyes fixed on the blood that now ran through the lines of the symbols. Despite it only being a few drops, it was now enough to cover the entire diagram. The candles blazed high, and I chanted louder, seeing the glowing chains that now surrounded Dulsanra, symbols running along the chain links. They wrapped around her entire body, across her neck, forehead, torso. I kept going, feeling Andora's presence in my head, her anger, her screams that were trying to break my concentration, but she didn't know me well enough. Despite my temper over trivial things, I didn't get riled up quickly over most things. Even when the Wendigos and Manangals attacked us when we were visiting Uncle Al's pack years ago, I was calm. Things like this didn't bother me. If only Andora knew that, she'd have realized she was fighting a losing battle. I watched the chains around Dulsanra tighten. She was lifted from the ground, her head dipping backwards as the chain trembled. I kept going, feeling the strain on my power, but I didn't stop, doing my best to shut Andora out. I was sweating. The urge to wipe my itchy forehead was strong, but I didn't stop, watching the symbols grow as Elle kept going. My hands raised readying for the exact moment when I was to perform the next step. When I saw the first crack in the chain, I chanted the next part of the spell louder, motioning with my hands outwards. My powers blazed and I felt the agonizing pull as if something was being ripped from me. My head was bursting with pain, but I kept my focus on Dulsanra. The chains were shattering but my vision was darkening. No. No. I had to keep going. I can help. Her snake-like voice hissed in my head. No. I wasn't going to fall for that. I slammed her out of my mind. The chains were breaking. Dulsanra's eyes flew open, blazing bright orangey red, and the surge of power Elle felt from her was shocking. Her eyes snapped towards me and she frowned in concentration, closing her eyes. I felt her exude so much power that I was barely able to keep my stance. I gasped, realizing she was working on breaking the seal too. Andora's scream of rage was echoing in my head, and just as I felt like I could no longer keep going, Dulsanra let out a scream, shattering the rest of the glowing chains. The blast knocked me back, but before Elle even hit the wall, Dulsanra raised her hand, slowing me down. Her eyes glowed, her hair flowing around her as she landed on the ground gently. The moment her toes touched the floor, a wave of power trembled the very ground we were standing on. She gave me a small smile, and I smiled back. We had done it. Dulsanra Rayhana's eyes fluttered shut as I lowered her to the ground. She had done it. I had never felt so powerful and free. Janina lowered the barrier just as I reached Rayhana, lowering her head gently to the ground. She had fallen unconscious, but the amount of power she had used had been immense. It's done, Janina said, sounding odd. I looked at her sharply. She sounded a little too surprised. I stood up, instantly being pulled into Rayhan's arms. My core throbbing as his body molded against mine. I hugged him tightly as he whispered "I love you kitten" in my ear, making my heart flutter. I tilted my head up and his lips claimed mine in a sizzling kiss. "Weren't you expecting us to succeed?" Elle asked Janina, once I had moved back, despite his hold never loosening on me. There was a lower percentage that it would succeed. But I was hoping you two were capable enough. I frowned, but didn't say anything more. I kind of understood her point, but at least it was done. Now is the best time to seal Andora away, she said, looking down at Rayhana. Whilst Serafina is weakened, Andora's hold on her is probably strong. I hope you didn't just put my sister in danger. Rayhan said coldly. No. Not more than she was already in. Janina replied icily. But we don't have much time, Dulsanra. You know the plan. I nodded, kissing Rayhan's cheek. I moved back, knowing we had no time to waste. Rayhana helped me, and now I will help her. The spell we were going to use was one where El would enter the place between this world and the afterlife, to find the crack Andora had created in the veil between the two and block it. The crack Andora was abusing the link between her heritage and the blood ties she had with Rayhana. Is there no other way? Rayhan asked quietly. I could sense his conflict and reluctance. I will be okay, I said. Trust in us. I don't like the risk, he said quietly. I cupped his face. How can anything keep us apart? You would rip apart the world for me. Do you think I wouldn't do the same to return to you? I said. He gripped my wrists, pulling them towards his chest, a frown crossing his face. Then remember. I will follow you and bring you back if need be. His voice was quiet, but the promise in it was absolute. My heart thumped, and something told me he would stick to that. I raised an eyebrow, running my hand slowly down his chest. There's far too much I want to do for me not to return. I whispered, my gaze trailing down his chest, my hands grazing those divine abs of his. I saw him swallow and smiled seductively, my fingers teasingly dipping into the band of his jeans. Reaching up, I kissed his neck. Oh, and I have a plan for this handsome neck of yours. I think everyone needs to know you're taken, I said, possessively. His eyes flashed green and he gripped my hips tightly, kissing me once again. We could never get enough. The incinerating pleasure El felt at his touch, the way he made my core throb, my body flutter and react, it was all just so. Can't wait to see what you've got in mind, he said huskily, his fingers slipping under my top, grazing my lower back. I shivered in pleasure before pulling away. I couldn't wait either, but right now, Rayhana needed us. It was an hour later, and we were ready. Rayhana lay before us. She still hadn't awoken, having exhausted her abilities. Rayhan was sitting behind me, his legs sprawled ahead and I was tucked up against his chest. Although Janina had scolded him, his presence helped, so she didn't argue after warning him not to be a distraction. I sat there, eyes closed, hands upwards. The spell cast around us was a combined one by me and Janina. Like all spells, there was a risk, and with this one, there was a strong chance I could be pulled into the other world and die. However, with my powers unsealed, the chance of that was low. I whispered the spell, feeling the pull, and knew I was no longer a part of my body. Everything was dark, and I felt myself being sucked into that darkness. I could hear myself chanting, but it was coming from around me. I was moving faster and faster until I could hear the rush of wind in my ears. It was so dark that Elle couldn't even see anything. It was just nothing. Then suddenly, I saw a faint light getting closer and closer. I felt a rush and I was suddenly standing before the light. It was a large crack of radiating beams, in this dreary darkness. The sound of talking, laughter, and merriment flitted through, along with a delicious scent, second only to Rayhan's, and a whisper of temptation to cross through pulled me further. My mind felt light and I smiled, reaching out for the light. Wait. Didn't someone tell me not to fall for that? I felt suddenly confused. What was I doing here? The feeling of fingers gently ghosting along my hips made me blink. The faint sparks of their touch made reality slap me in the face. Rayhan. Rayhana. Andora. I backed away, my heart thundering as I realized what I had been about to do. Crossover. Oh, interesting, a whispery voice came. My stomach twisted and any lightheadedness that had settled on me vanished. So, it didn't work. What a shame. I guess we will do this the hard way. I knew who that voice belonged to and the anger that I felt inside me blazed like a phoenix reborn from the ashes. Dulsanra Andora. I said coldly, the blistering rage I felt swirling around me, burning bright in the darkness before the veil. Her outline became clear and soon her face sharpened, a face Elle never wanted to see again. She looked the same yet different. Dulsanra. It's a shame you're not burning in the pits of hell. I said coldly, circling the woman. I could feel her tension, her lips pressed into a taut line. Her fists clenched tightly. I am not so easy to beat. She hissed. You're dead, Andora. No matter how much you claw your way to the place between both worlds, there is no return for you without the help of powerful witches. I said, approaching her. My heart was racing, but it wasn't in fear. Her dark orange eyes held unmasked resentment. Stay back. She hissed. So, she too knew I was far stronger than her. I won't, because I am done with your selfish plans. You almost made Serafina kill those whom she loves. You made me commit so many evil deeds. Do you think you deserve anything but the most severe form of punishment? I asked in disgust. Don't think just because your abilities are unsealed that you can defeat me. She hissed. I don't think I can, I said softly, stepping up right before her. The flames that danced around me made her step back. I know I can. We could have been strong. She spat, but I knew that she already knew she was not going to get far. I'm not a fool. The thing is, even if you had treated me well and kept me by your side, I wouldn't have ever agreed to your sick plans. I snapped coldly. Don't you see it? We are both daughters of darkness. Hybrids. I looked at her in disgust. From all the memories I had, her telling me I was pure evil, pure darkness, that I should be grateful that she was letting me live. Yet, I wasn't falling. Oh please, even if I am considered darkness, I'm not. My mother wasn't evil, the witches were, the ones who subjected her to so much. I hissed, my anger bubbling strongly. Andora seemed to realize her words weren't going to work and rolled her eyes. You are as stupid as my sons were. She spat. Her gaze fell on my neck, and I smirked coldly. No, more like we aren't stupid enough to fall for your crap. The thing is, Andora, I'm here for a reason, and I don't have any time to waste with the likes of you. I said, readying myself for the very spell that would cut her tie with Rayhana. There's nothing you can do. She hissed, but the fear was clear in her eyes. I smiled confidently. Actually, I can. I whirled around, chanting the spell that I had worked so hard on, a spell that would cut the soul link that a witch had with her ancestors. When our abilities begin to drain, we can call on our ancestors to help us, but this would remove that link from Rayhana, and with it, end Andora's control. Despite it being one of the strongest bloodlines in history, with Rayhana's consent, it was the only option and one she too felt was the right thing to do. Andora's hold was far too strong. She tried to attack me, but with Rayhana having inherited half her powers, she was far too weak, and with my full potential unsealed, she didn't stand a chance. The flames blazed high around me, a blinding force began spreading around us, and soon they began to materialize into swirling lines. The blinding glows from the threads were of every color possible, some looped across each other, some connected and spiraling off elsewhere, weaving all around us like the roots of a tree, spreading into the vast darkness that surrounded us. These were the threads that bind us, the link to call upon our own ancestors. I looked down, seeing that there were 3 very different lines that connected me. 2 passing through beyond the veil. One was a glowing deep red, the other was a smoky glittering black, it stood out from all the ones around us. The third was a blinding white and it spiraled back the way I came. Rayhan. The string that connected my bond with Rayhan. I now understand when people talk about breaking the bond, or a rejection, there was actually something connecting us so deeply that it was wrapped around our very souls. I looked at the black string, I knew what it was. My demon sighed. My heart thundered as Elle stared at it, before remembering I needed to focus on the spell at hand. My blazing eyes snapped to Andora, who was pale as she tried to counter it. It was then that I saw it. The thread that connected her to Rayhana glowed brightly and was crossing into the darkness away from the glowing entrance of the crack in the veil. Keeping the spell intact, I whispered another. "Don't do it!" She shrieked, lunging at me, but before she reached me, I motioned my hands apart, feeling the extreme force of the thread I was trying to break burn within me. I didn't stop, whispering the last words of the spell. Andora's scream of rage and anguish filled the air, ringing in my ears, my head pounding at the sheer level of her shrieks. She rammed into me, not caring for the flames that were burning her skin. "If Elle can't have her, then I will have you," she hissed. She began chanting a spell, her hands tied around my throat, but I simply glared at her. An earth-shattering blast knocked her far back, slamming her into some of the threads that were still woven around us. Hitting the ground, I walked towards her, grabbing her by the front of her black dress. "I think if the god of death himself cannot contain you, I will do the favor for him," I hissed. A spell that Andora used to use on me years ago came to the front of my mind. I chanted it, watching the flames wrap around her, my own pain and memories returning to the forefront of my mind. She shrieked in pure agony. "Stop it! Stop it! You cannot beat me!" she hissed. "This is the spell you love to punish me with, right? Do you know? The flames didn't really work on me. I'm sure you are feeling it so much more," I said, watching the never-ending flames eat away at her. "Now to send her to Hades himself." I dragged her up, ready to push her through the veil as she struggled and writhed in my hold. "No. No. I need to kill my sons for disobeying me. You cannot defeat me. I ignored her, dragging her towards the shimmering veil. The crack was inviting me to it. I looked away. Focus, Del. This was the part I had planned on my own. I didn't want to risk Andora finding another way back to hurt those that I loved. I dragged her past the crack in the veil to an untouched part of it. What are you doing? Do you know that when you made me contact the ones beyond the grave for answers, you allowed me the chance to learn the darkest of spells? I looked at her coldly. You can't. You cannot open a gateway. She looked horrified, and I smiled wryly. Oh, I assure you I can. I said. I dropped her to the floor, the flames still burning her. The agony and pain on her face were clear, but her anger still overruled it. I closed my eyes, chanting one spell I refused to tell Andora. A spell that I had once attempted to perform but I had missed a few vital words. The spell that had eaten at my life force and the reason my hair had turned white. A spell that she had wanted me to perform for her. And in turn, she had been ready to let me die in the process. She watched in pure horror, realization settling in as she stared at me with pure hatred and rage. With this spell I could have got the very first witches to earth so easily. I know. It's why Elle would never have told you. My power stormed around me, and even when she tried to grab me, it was futile. Her hands were not even able to touch the surge of blinding force that emanated from me. How the tables have turned. Elle will change. Please. Dulsanra. She shrieked. The first cracks in the veil appeared, and I could feel the pure heat that came from within. The burning flames could be seen, and I smiled. Look, Andora, the lowest pits of hell await you. I whispered coldly. Leaning down, I grabbed her by her arm and dragged her to the veil. I didn't wait to hear anything from her, ignoring her shrieks and struggles. The power that this spell was taking from me was far too much. My chest tightened, and I used my full force to knock her through. If I am going, so are you. She hissed. She yanked me by my hair, but I held my ground. The ghostly feeling of someone's hands tightening around my waist told me Rayhan was waiting for me. I raised my hand, blasting her through the veil, and instantly let it snap shut. The last thing I heard was her scream of despair before I was met with complete darkness. The only light came from the hundreds of threads that swirled around me, their glows dimmed. I did it. Dulsanra, I staggered away from the wall. I had actually done it. Andora was gone. For good. I looked down at the 2 lines that led through that crack that still promised happiness. I walked towards it slowly, brushing my finger along the black string. My heart racing as I looked at the barrier. I grabbed onto the string, tugging it gently. I thought I heard a sound from beyond the barrier. My heart thumped louder as I approached it. By any chance, could my mother be there? On the other side? You can do this, kitten. Rayhan's faint voice came from somewhere far away, and I hesitated, my eyes flitting to the crack. I won't cross through. I needed to see. I inched closer, feeling a slight tug on the black thread. A little whimper filled my ears and my heart pounded faster. Hello. I whispered, reaching for the veil. My fingers were only inches from the crack. When small slender hands pushed my hand away from it. I gasped as the hands waved, motioning me to stop. I fell to my knees, my heart thudding as the owner of the hands peeked through the barrier. My heart was clenching as so many emotions exploded within me. She was small, maybe just under 4 feet tall. Her skin was a pale, pinky white. Her eyes were large and doe-like, a brilliant shade of red, rimmed with beautiful thick lashes. She had a button nose and pouty plump lips. Her hair was dark red, cascading around her shoulders and down her waist. She had a tail with a pointy tip and her small red dress was wrapped around her curvy yet delicate figure. Everything, including her pointed ears and those fangs, told me she was who I thought she was. She tilted her head, looking at the thread that bound us, her eyes widening as they too were blurred with tears, just like my own were. "Mama!" I whispered. She smiled and nodded, her tears streaming down her cheeks as she glanced behind her, treading to the tip of the veil, before reaching out and cupping my cheeks. Pain suffocating me, I closed my eyes the moment her small hands cupped my face. Her hands were soft, I could sense her nervousness, her excitement, and her worry. I felt a soft warmth envelope me from her gentle touch. "You're my mum," I whispered. Her eyes widened and she smiled, nodding. I wrapped my hands around her tiny wrists. The happiness that consumed me knowing I was meeting my mother, the sadness knowing it was the only time, the pain, remembering what she had been through. I cried softly, as she simply cupped my face. Brushing away my tears was futile as only more took their place. Her own tears were streaming down her cheeks as she gazed at me like I was the most amazing thing that existed. She suddenly tensed looking around and I realized the crack was growing, the whispering and chatter becoming louder. She was about to pull away but hesitated. "Already?" I whispered, knowing that we had to separate. She nodded, slowly moving her hands away. "How could you love someone you had never met before?" The pain in my chest was choking me. I reached out to her but she stepped back, waving her hands, warning me to stop. She looked around, then pointed at me slowly before placing her hands on her heart. I smiled sadly, placing my hand, then I pointed at her and formed a heart with my hands. I didn't need to say the words. I knew she understood, because no matter what, a mother would. She smiled before looking around as the crack began to deteriorate. I kept my gaze on her, and she held my gaze until it snapped shut, forever. The weave of threads vanished and I was left alone in utter darkness. I bent down as pain consumed me, tears spilling down my cheeks. "Come home, kitten." Rayhan's soft voice was far. My home. With those that still lived. I stood up. Taking a deep breath, I focused on returning to my mate. Andora was finally gone forever. My eyes flew open, I was still in Rayhan's arms. "You did it!" Janina's voice barely registered as I turned and hugged Rayhan tightly, breaking into soft sobs. His arms tightened around me. "It's going to be okay," he whispered. I didn't know if he even knew what happened, but all I needed was his comfort, his embrace, his love. Because he was probably the only person who could ever understand me so deeply. He shifted my position, making me straddle him as I hugged him tighter. He kissed the side of my face, my salty tears on his lips. I looked into his eyes, and he stood up, cupping my thighs. He carried me from the cave. Neither of us spoke, he simply walked away until we were a distance away, when he finally sat down on the ground, placing me in his lap and wrapping his arms around me tightly, as if shielding me from the entire world. My safe place. I clutched onto his shirt, letting my emotions out. He whispered words of comfort and sweet nothings. Not once did he stop caressing my hair, placing soft kisses on my cheeks, lips, nose, forehead, and head. My comfort. I don't know when I stopped crying, or when I had fallen asleep, but when I opened my eyes, we were still sitting there, his jacket now also wrapped around my shoulders. It was still warm, but night had fallen and a cool wind was blowing. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be," he said softly, cupping my face and kissing my lips sweetly. I looked into his grey eyes that held such love for me and smiled. "Won't you ask me why I'm crying?" I asked softly. "No, because I know when you are ready, you will tell me," he replied. I rested my head against his shoulder, inhaling his soothing scent, and closed my eyes. I remained silent for a bit before I spoke. After I cut the connection between Andora and Rehana, I decided to send her to a place she can't try to return from. She was hell-bent on returning, so I had to be sure, and then I met her. I whispered, my tears threatening to leak from my eyes once more. "Your mother?" he asked softly. I looked up at him and nodded. He cupped my face, kissing me passionately, and I kissed him back, my heart racing as I sobbed against his lips. He tried to move back, but I refused, kissing him until I needed air. His arms enclosed me once more. "I'm sure she was happy to have been able to meet you," he whispered. I nodded. "She looked happy," I whispered. "I'm sure she's looking down on you, and I'm sure she's happy her beautiful daughter is alive and living her life." I simply nodded, unable to speak. A comforting silence fell between us, and only when we heard footsteps did we turn. "I'm sorry, but you used a lot of your magic. I brought food," Rehana said softly. I looked up and moved away from Rehan, standing up. She smiled, placing the large plate down before standing straight once again. "Thank you. You took a big risk for me," she said softly. "For us all," I corrected. We smiled at each other before hugging each other tightly. A shaky laugh left her, and I couldn't help but smile. We were both free. "I'm kind of jealous that you made her smile." Rehan's voice made us break apart. We exchanged looks before bursting into laughter at the jealous pout on his face. "Oh, come on, I might make her smile, but I'm sure you make her experience a whole lot more," Rehana said, sitting down. I smirked before climbing into my yum-yums. His eyes widened in surprise at the look on my face and I knew I had shifted. I smiled a whole lot more, I said, tracing a finger over his lips. "Kitten," he muttered, throbbing hard. Rehana giggled as she picked up a sandwich piece. "I'm so hungry, for sandwiches," I said, about to pull away when his eyes flashed. "I don't think so, kitten," he murmured huskily, one hand tangling in my hair as he pulled me closer, his other arm tightening around my waist. I loved when he became dominating. "What are you going to do, punish me, Alpha?" I teased. Okay. I'm going. Rayhana shrieked before she ran off with her sandwich, but neither I nor Rayhan noticed, our lips crushing together in a hot, heated kiss. The hidden relief that we had overcome this huge hurdle filled us both. Rayhan, a few days had passed, and it was the day that Lola, Rose, and Chris were popping down. We had told Janina, who had only agreed if the girls managed to come to a certain level in their training. With both of them at their best with no seals or mind intrusions, they were learning fast, and she had begrudgingly told us that we may enjoy one night. She herself was going to see if she could find any answers regarding the witch hunters or anything regarding the matter. I was grateful to her for trying and for everything she was doing with the girls. I hoped that one day, when everything was sorted, she could live the life she wanted. With her gone, we had full reins to do as we wished, and I actually was looking forward to it. The others were going to bring the meat, the grill, and everything else we needed. The weather was hot, and I think the three of us were looking for some normality. Being out here, constantly training and learning, wasn't easy. Dulsanra was handling it best, but that only showed that she'd truly had a rough life. Guess what? Dulsanra said, wrapping her arms around me from behind. I'm sure you'll tell me, I replied, enjoying the sparks that rushed through me at her hold. Was it bad that I wanted her to wrap her hand a lot lower? I have some good news. She whispered in my ear. I unwrapped her arms from around me, turning and pushing her up against the wall. Oh yeah? What's the good news, kitten? That you're teasing me so much that I want to take you right here. I murmured huskily, running one hand up her as I pressed myself against her. She bit her bottom lip, her gorgeous blue eyes sparkling with anticipation. Wait until tonight, but, the good news is, I know a contraceptive spell. So you can, she smiled. Come inside of me. With no worries. She finished, reaching up and kissing my lips, just as we heard Rayhana's footsteps. Okay, can you stop making out with her all the time, Rayhan? We need to get ready. Rayhana retorted. I raised an eyebrow as Dulsanra smirked. Did she not see that it was her friend who seduced me? Get ready? I asked, watching Dulsanra walk off, my eyes on her. Yeah, it's the first time in a while that we can have some fun and be ourselves. Rayhana said, brushing her hair back. I didn't reply. When I had told them that Chris was coming, I had heard the way her heart had raced. The way she tried to play it off as if it was no big deal, even Chris had changed. Lola said there'd not been one woman he'd entertained lately and he was often lost in thought. The only time he lost it was during draining, when he and Blake ended up matched. I didn't get what his problem was with Blake, but Dad and Lola had to break it up. I watched Rayhana run her fingers through Dulsanra's hair, saying she was going to curl it, but there was no electricity. Girl, we don't need electricity, look. Dulsanra said, whispering a spell as she grabbed the plug for the curler. Oh, perfect. Rayhana replied happily and got to work. I raised my eyebrow. Who would have thought magic was coming so easily to them? I was proud of them. Rayhan, can I do something with your hair? Rayhana asked. No, his hair's gorgeous open. My kitten added, her eyes running over me appreciatively. It's grown over the last month, hasn't it? Rayhana added. I actually like it. Dulsanra added. I smirked. Exactly, so you don't need to add your opinion, RI. She rolled her eyes. Fine, so I told Rose to get one of my bikinis and she picked one out for you too. I made sure it's your color, she said to Dulsanra, making me freeze. What? I asked. What? It's hot. Rayhan retorted. So you two are going to be parading around in bikinis? I asked. It was my turn to run my eyes over Dulsanra. Well, I was looking forward to this. She blushed lightly under my intense gaze, and Rayhana snickered. Seriously, you two are so linked up. In love. Dulsanra corrected her. I zoned them out, trying not to imagine Dulsanra in one or I'll be hard in no time. I walked out of the cavern, thinking about Chris again. What was I supposed to say to him when she was going to be literally torturing him? She really wasn't an angel. Night had fallen and the other three had arrived. Chris and I were already grilling the steaks, lamb chops, chicken wings, and fillets. Mom had been the one to marinate it all for us, along with some desserts she had made. In her own way, she was trying, and I really appreciated it. I think this time away had helped, and I just hoped once we returned things weren't so bad. The girls had gone into the cave as Rayhana wanted her stuff. I didn't miss how Chris' gaze kept flickering towards the cave, which was a little away from where we were at. Impatient much? I remarked, as I flipped open the two cooler bags that contained the drinks. Of course not. He replied. I glanced at him. Both of us were dressed in shorts. The weather was warm, the perfect night for a barbecue and a swim. The water was hitting the shore gently and I was looking forward to spending some time in it with Dulsanra later. So, what's the game plan for tonight? I asked, taking out the cheese slices and layering the buns. Game plan? He moved his brown. Come on man, you're quicker than that. He means RI. Lola added. I turned only to see she was alone, wearing a black Nike swimsuit with little shorts and her hair tied up. She isn't a game or nothing. He replied. What is that, like a test question? No, if you like her, I was just wondering. I shrugged. This conversation was weird. I find her mate. He said, but the bitterness was clear. I didn't know what to say to that. It was on them. Well, it's between you two. I said, running my fingers through my hair. He looked at me surprised, before he smirked. What is this, giving me indirect permission to do as I want? He mocked. Yeah, because I know you. I said, not fazed. Yeah, I knew him, I also knew he cared for her. I heard a laugh. I turned along with Chris and Lola. The three girls were walking together, but my eyes instantly honed in on Dulsanra. She was in the middle, in a sky blue bikini that left her killer body on perfect display. Her eyes met mine and she placed her hand on her other arm. Her entire body was oiled up and did I want her? I heard Chris mutter a swear and Lola chuckle, but I was too lost in my kitten to even bother looking at the others. Her hair had been curled, she had some eye makeup on and some gloss. She ruffled her hair, blushing lightly as those startling blue eyes that matched her bikini met mine. A body chain fell between her and circled her waist. She stopped before me and I swallowed hard. "Hey," I said, unable to string two words together. I pulled her into my arms. "How about we skip the food, and I enjoy you instead?" She blushed, her fingers reaching up and playing with the necklace that hung around my neck. Tiptoeing she kissed my neck, before her lips brushed my ear. As much as I like the sound of that, how about dinner first, dessert later? Guys! We can hear you! Rayhana said. Both of us ignored her, our lips meeting in a passionate, hungry kiss. I squeezed her, loving how it wasn't all covered by the tiny fabric, throbbing against her stomach. Our tongues teasing with the others, she was too good. She moaned against my lips, sighing softly. "Ahem, guys," Lola said, grinning as she shoved me a little. "Come on, friend time, remember?" "Yeah, I mean, I get they look smoking hot, but let's not get ahead, right?" Chris said. I didn't miss Rayhana ruffling her hair, it seemed they hadn't really spoken. "Okay, sorry," Dulsanra said, kissing me before pulling away. I now turned to look at the others. Rose was in a turquoise bikini with a kaftan over it, but it was Rayhana who made me raise my eyebrow. Wearing a barely there metallic bikini set, actually, I don't think you can even call it that. Isn't that like 5 sizes too small for you? I asked, frowning. Sure, I get that she was mega confident. "Rayhan, don't," she said unhappily. "Yeah, I don't get why you're complaining. I'm the one who's going to be trying not to stare at her." Chris's voice came through the link. I glared at him only to find him busy flipping the chops. I did not want to think of my friend staring at my sister. "Relax, handsome," Dulsanra said. "Come on, I'm hungry." I kissed her neck, deciding to just enjoy the evening. "Rayhan, I got music," Rose said, as she began setting up her portable speaker. "Good, because I want to dance." Rayhana said, "Do you know how nice it is to actually feel human again?" "I'm sure it's pretty good, babe," Rose replied. "Come on, I think you needed it," Lola added. "I'm surprised you even survived. Did you cry over a broken nail or not having a plushie to cuddle up to at night?" Chris mocked. Rayhana shot me a glare. "Hey, I didn't say anything," I added. Chris smirked. "I guess I know you pretty well." She was pretty good. Actually, she could probably flip all of you on your asses if she wanted. Dulsanra said, and Rayhana shot her an appreciative smile. "And something tells me, even if she didn't succeed, you would help her," Rose added with a smile. "Absolutely," Dulsanra agreed as she bent down to spread the mat. My eyes fell on her, and I did my best not to shamelessly stare. Wanted to do a lot to that tonight. These two actually partner up against me, I added, taking the buns off the rack. The cheese had melted perfectly. The food smelled great, but she smelled better. "Not jealous, are you, Ray?" Lola added. "Why should he be jealous? He's probably happy, right, babe?" Rose asked, kissing Lola on the lips before she took some of the cans. "No beer for those two," Chris added. "Hey, you can't say that. Besides, I have my wolf now, so I can probably tolerate more. Rayhana said, unsure despite her words, as both Chris and I began placing the food down. Oh yeah? Chris asked her. Their eyes met, and we were all pretty aware of the tension between them. Yeah. Rayhana said, poking her eyes out at him. Chris's gaze dipped down before he looked away quickly. Well, this was weird. Rose tried to change the subject, but the excitement on her face was obvious. Oh, this tastes so good. Dulsanra said, biting into a hot wing. Ouch, hot. Careful, kitten, I don't want you to burn yourself. I said, taking it from her as she blew on her fingers. I gripped her wrist, sucking on her fingertips softly. Her heart thudded as our eyes met. It isn't that hot, I can handle heat. She said softly. I know you can. I replied, the lingering taste of the spices on her lips mixed with her own sweetness. I moved back slowly, breaking a piece of the wing and placing the chicken in her mouth. A flash of a camera going off made me glance away from my gorgeous kitten. Rose winked at us. Sorry, you two are just so cute. She said, placing some chicken in a burger for herself as she tossed her phone to the ground. Just like you, love. Lola said. Dulsanra and I began placing food into one of the paper plates. She smiled. The gap between them made me want to slip my hand right there and kiss her whilst pleasuring her. She smiled softly, kissing me before she held one of the two burgers up to me. I took it. One hand still snaked around her, as a gentle breeze brushed past us. Some old songs played on the radio, and it felt great. Once this crap was all over, I was looking forward to more moments like this. I kissed her deeply, cherishing the moment. Rayhana, seeing him hurt so much, I wanted to go over to him, pull him down and kiss him the moment I had seen him. I didn't miss the way his heart had raced, the way his eyes drank me in and darkened before he forced his gaze away, leaving my stomach a knot of nerves. If I could, I would have shamelessly checked him out, goddess, he was perfect. Okay, so how long do you think you lot are down here for? Chris asked. Did his voice always sound so good? Well, we are doing pretty well. I'd say there's just the one step that we really have to do. I said, tossing my hair back as I looked into those piercing green eyes. I can see that. Eyes up here, Summers. I mind-linked, biting into my burger. Only for his eyes to flash as he watched me bite into the burgers. Okay, crap, I didn't mean for him to focus on my lips. You can mind-link now, Ray was saying. Congrats. Thank you, I can shift too. I replied, my heart skipping a beat. Wouldn't mind seeing your wolf later. Is that a date? I asked airily. We could call it that if you wanted. His husky reply came. My stomach fluttered. I looked away, so glad, I didn't blush much. The others had been too busy with their own partners, and I was relieved. We carried on eating, making small talk, sometimes teasing one another. Although I dared not get involved when it came to Chris, I didn't trust myself. Wait, I just agreed to show him my wolf later. Oh, why did I do that? This is a change. You haven't gone for Chris even once tonight? Rayhan said, looking at Lola. Well, he seems to have made fewer comments recently. Lola said, giving Chris a look. Chris smirked. Unless you want me to. I mean, I have many. Can I say, looking at you women tonight, I want you to put on a nice show for us Greek gods. She was up in a flash, startling Rose as she lunged at him. Don't you dare! Do you want that pretty face of yours beaten? She growled, smacking him once before pushing him onto the ground. I tried not to pay attention to his ABS, or refined V, as he held Lola at arm's length laughing. My gaze dipped to the bulge in his trunks and my heart thudded as I quickly looked away, picking up my beer can. I looked up, sensing someone watching me, and saw Dulsanra smirking at me, wriggling her eyebrows suggestively. I pouted, giving her a look. She had caught me, she smiled, and I didn't need the mind link to know that she was telling me to talk to him. Well, that was inevitable anyway since I said I'll show him my wolf later. After we had eaten, we all ended up going into the water, splashing around. We broke into 2 teams, Rose, Del, and me on one, and the other 3 together. I and Dulsanra used a few spells to splash the rest, and obviously, with magic, we were winning. And maybe we weren't splashing them but drowning them. That is not fair, Chris said, breaking the surface of the water as he shook his soaking hair. Ah, what's wrong, babe? Can't handle some women? Rose teased as we all burst out laughing. Can he ever handle women? Lola remarked. I'm sure I can get Del on our side. Rayhan said, giving her that smile of his that I knew worked on every woman. Hey! No playing dirty, Ray! I said, tossing a wave of water between him and Dulsanra. She shrieked, backing up as Rose caught her. Unlike the rest of us, she couldn't swim and was using her abilities to stay afloat. They both giggled as Rayhan was knocked back by my wave of water. Oh, I love magic! I laughed, when suddenly something grabbed my ankle, dragging me underwater. I screamed in alarm before I was pulled under. I looked down, only to see Chris. I glared at the smirking culprit. I hissed through the link, trying to free myself from his hold. I couldn't even use a spell. He smirked, making my heart skip a beat. He let go of my leg only to grab me around the waist and pull me towards him. Well, we can all cheat, princess. I couldn't even think of a reply, my mind going haywire with his body pressed against mine. What? I wasn't meant to say that. I didn't know how to shut my thoughts off properly yet. His chuckle came through the link, his hand reached up, brushing a strand of my hair back before he swam to the surface. My heart was a roller coaster, and even when we broke the surface, I wasn't able to focus. His arm left me and I felt as if I had suddenly become empty. Even when he, Lola and Rayhan were clearly planning something, the moon shining down on him as he high-fived them, I couldn't think of anything but the fact that the pack playboy had won me over. Goddess help me! I was in love with Chris. Dulsanra Rayhan lifted me bridal style as he carried me out of the water. I smiled, looking up at him. I swear, this guy was not a man but a god. His long hair looked so wet, the water dripping down his body with his black shorts hung low on him. I bit my lip, running my fingers through his hair as I kissed his neck, exactly where his mate mark should be, hearing him suck in a breath. I smiled softly, moving back, tracing my finger there. Tonight was the last night where his neck would be so empty. Care to share? He asked softly, placing me down and passing me a drink. I simply shook my head. Guys, we are going to head off all right, Lola said with a smirk, her arms wrapped around Rose, who was kissing her neck. They were such a cute couple. Go get some. Chris snickered. I will asterisk. She shot back with a grin. I could tell she was not offended at all. Rayhana was busy toweling her hair, and I had to admit the girl knew how to do everything perfectly. Her back was towards Chris, and in those tiny thong bottoms, even a saint would look. I hid my amusement, watching Chris discreetly as he drank a cold can of fizzy. His eyes kept on going back to her. I turned back to my own man as I sipped my drink. His hands trailed up my thigh, making me forget everything else. I wanted him. I locked my arms around his neck, holding my can in one hand. Should we get out of here too? I whispered suggestively. His eyes flashed and I smiled, feeling him throb against me, his eyes locked with my reddish gold ones. Yeah, let's go kitten. He whispered, kissing me hungrily. I kissed him back, moaning against his lips before we broke apart. He pulled away forcefully, glancing at Chris and Rayhana. Mind keeping an eye on her? We're getting some alone time, he said with a smirk at his friend. Chris raised an eyebrow. Not at all, I can keep an eye or two on her, he said, glancing at Rayhana, who was touching up her gloss. Besides, we're going to go for a run. Nice, I would ask when that plan got made, but I don't really care right now, Rayhan said, his eyes raking over me, lingering on my boobs. Good, Rayhan remarked. See you guys later, I said, placing my can down as Rayhan's arm snuck around my waist and he led me away. We walked for a little while, my arms around his waist, enjoying the moment. Everything felt so peaceful, and I didn't even realize I needed this. With the upcoming trials, I wasn't sure what would happen, but that's funny, I smirked. Really kitten? Do you blame me? You're a tease, he said. I rolled my eyes. Or you just find me incredibly tempting, I don't think that's even up for debate, he said. I bit my lip, my gaze flickering to his. My core throbbing at his proximity, the burning need for him only growing. I love you, I said softly, brushing my fingers through his hair. Love you more than I can ever express, he replied, leaning down. He claimed my lips in a soft, tender yet deep kiss that ignited every emotion within me. I melted into his touch, kissing him back slowly. We broke apart slowly, his scent, his touch, his taste leaving me lightheaded. I want to mark you, I said softly, looking up at him. His eyes filled with curiosity as he ran his fingers through my hair, his thumb caressing my cheek before he cupped the back of my neck. What you got in mind? Sit down, I commanded softly. He smirked, dropping to the ground. I climbed on top of him, positioning myself right on top of him. I throbbed hard and I knew he could smell my arousal. Well, I want everyone to know you're mine, although I can't naturally bite and mark you, I came up with an idea. Do you trust me? Is that even a question? He raised an eyebrow. I knew he did. I ran my fingers through his hair, our eyes simply gazing into each other's, as much as we wanted to suck the brains out of each other, the bond we had was so much more. He tilted his head, raising his eyebrows. Dad says you shouldn't delay good things. He remarked teasingly. Then we should listen to Papa Raff's words of wisdom. I said amused, taking a deep breath. He chuckled before I moved closer, kissing his neck. This might hurt a little. Go for it. He whispered, stroking my back. I knew my bite would simply heal, but I had a plan. Closing my eyes, I sank my teeth into his neck. Oh, that sound was so. I tangled my hand into his hair, feeling him throb against me. I grinned slowly against him, the taste of his blood filling my mouth. I extracted my teeth, as I gazed at the mark. Now here we go. I whispered the spell I had prepped, brushing my finger over the marks my fangs had left. Swirls began spreading from the 2 holes where my teeth had pierced his skin, spreading out into a tribal design. I guess I was lucky that I could design my own mark. I smiled, not finished. Along the tribal design on each side, in the ancient tongue, symbols of our names began forming, each one curled around the tribal design in a deep green ink. Shimmering brightly against the black, I frowned as I ended with the final words, "We are one." Those were written in the ancient tongue too. All done and you are healed too. I said, kissing his mark softly. I want to see it, but I don't even have a phone. He said, a small frown on his face. 1 second. I think I can show you. I said. Whispering a spell, I let him see through my eyes, a spell similar to the one I had cast where I showed him my memory. With my powers unsealed, I didn't need anything to help cast such spells. He whistled softly. I love it, it's perfect. I'm glad. This here is my name, and this is yours. This says we are one. I whispered, my heart beating nervously as I traced each word. I didn't ask for his opinion on anything, but I hoped he was okay with it. 73. Dulsanra, he tangled his hand in my hair, pulling me close, his lips crashing against me in a passionate, burning kiss. I gasped, kissing him back. He didn't need to reassure me, he loved it. He flipped us over, my back now on the ground, pushing my blue bikini top up. I moaned softly, my back arching. He broke away from my lips, kissing me roughly down my neck, leaving a trail of marks in his wake. The pain and pleasure combined made me moan loudly, and I didn't care that we were out in the open. My eyes fluttered open when he unhooked my top, tossing it aside. The oil that covered my body only made his hands gently glide smoothly. Pleasure rushed through me in delicious waves, every nerve in my body reacting to him, awakening a burning desire inside of me. It was out of this world and I saw stars. I love you, baby girl. His strong arms wrapped around me, supporting my body from falling face forward to the ground. I love you too, Rayhan. I managed to whisper. Life with Rayhan was really, truly perfect. The moment we were alone, the tension between us grew. Although my entire body told me to go over there, yank that tiny thong off her and take her right here again and again until I dropped, I knew I couldn't do that. Why was she so tantalizing? She finished putting her gloss away and stood up. So, shall we shift? Yeah, let's. I said, my eyes unable to leave her gorgeous brown ones. She held my gaze, reaching behind her when I realized she was about to take off her bikini, not that it left much to imagination. I muttered, dragging my eyes from her and turning my back on her. I knew she was smirking, and I quickly pulled my shorts down, shifting. The crack of bones behind me told me she had shifted too. I turned to look at her. My own wolf growled at the sight of her. She was gorgeous. Her glossy brown fur, those glowing eyes. Yet something about them was still doe-like, if that was even possible. She had her head held up high, as if displaying her full beauty, and yet, I liked it. Okay, now even my wolf wants a piece of her. You're gorgeous, princess. I know, came her proud reply. I walked over to her, smirking in my head at her reply. Our eyes locked and I nuzzled my nose into her neck. She responded perfectly, leaning closer to me, and I wondered why we couldn't have this connection as humans. Why couldn't I pull her into my arms and tell her I cared? So much that she was all that I could think of. I don't know how I was going to survive when her mate came along. Shall we run, handsome? Or are you planning on worshipping my gorgeous form all night? I'd rather worship your human form. Okay, why do I speak without thinking? Yeah, let's run. I added quickly, leading the way. She didn't reply, but she was beside me in seconds, running along. Neither of us spoke, sometimes nudging the other, trying to slow the other down. She did it more often, trying to run ahead, and although I could easily beat her, I let her win. Because for this woman, I was ready to lose every time if it meant she'd be happy. Come on, slowpoke. What's the point of such a big wolf if you can't run faster? She teased. Oh yeah? I'll show you what this body is good for. I growled. I pounced, making sure I wasn't rough as I knocked her to the ground. We rolled over, her laughter filling my head. Chris, whatever you call me is fine, anything sounds good in that gorgeous voice of yours, princess. I shot back. We finally came to a stop, with her pinning me down. I win, she said. You already had long ago. Our eyes met and she narrowed hers. You didn't let me win, right? She asked suspiciously. She moved back slightly, before she suddenly shifted. My eyes widened in shock as she straddled my huge wolf completely. Rehana, I couldn't stop myself from running my eyes over her. If heaven was a woman, it would be her. I love you, Chris. She whispered, her eyes holding so many emotions. My eyes flew open and I shifted back, my heart thundering as those words registered. Before I could even respond, she bent down, her gaze flickering to my lips. I couldn't stop myself. Her scent was creating a haze around me, her lips were the forbidden fruit that I craved, and my hand tangled in her hair, pulling her closer. I had rejected her once. I couldn't do it again, I didn't want to. Behind that confidence was a glimmer of uncertainty, one I wanted to remove, and so, I claimed her lips in a deep, passionate kiss. Yes, this was what I wanted, the only woman I wanted. Our lips moved as one, perfectly in sync. The sweet taste of her mouth was one I had missed. I ran my hand down her back, not caring that she wasn't wearing anything. Only tempting me further. Would I get to taste her again? Was this our last kiss? Her smell hit me like a drug, and I kissed her harder, hungrier. I wanted to feel every inch of her. She moaned, reacting to my touch. I had never seen a more beautiful woman. I love you, princess. So much. My heart tightened and I tensed when I realized what I had just thought. When had I fallen in love? I froze and she slowly moved back, her eyes filling with hurt. I shook my head, sitting up and wrapping my arms tightly around her. She needed to know how she made me feel. You're only 18, Ri. You haven't found your mate, this isn't what you want. I said quietly. It was taking my all to fight that were consuming me. Who would have thought someone like me would be doing my all to refuse what I truly wanted? But she was more than that. She wasn't someone I wanted to hurt or simply use. I don't care. I don't want them. She whispered. Our noses brushed and I closed my eyes. You might. I don't want to make things harder for you, princess. Why don't you let me make my decisions for myself? She asked. Because I don't want to influence you into making a bad decision. You deserve way better. Her eyes were filled with hurt, but she was strong. Despite the emotions that stormed through her, she held herself together. You have no right to tell me what I deserve, or what is best for me. She whispered, slowly moving back. Tell me one thing, Chris. Do you love me? I tensed, I knew the answer, but I didn't want to hold her back. I looked away, my own chest tightening at the fact that I couldn't even tell her. Her hand reached for my face, and she smiled softly, turning me to face her. I'm pretty good at sensing a person's emotions, Chris. But if you think the mating ball will make me change my mind, then fine. Let's wait until then. She said, leaning forward. She kissed me, I kissed her back. My hand tangled in her hair, and the fear that she was probably going to be taken away from me fueled that kiss. It was hungry, rough, confused and perfect. Our emotions were creating a storm, and I didn't see a way out, or a future for us. She was an alpha female, a hybrid, a queen. I didn't deserve her, her mate should be a alpha. No. You are the one I want. Her soft voice came through the link as she broke away from me. She understood me without me even speaking. It's getting late. I'm going to head back to the cavern. She whispered, a small smirk crossed her lips as she looked down at me. Well, it's better than I imagined. I guess that can make up for the fact that it's been a little. I smirked, leaning back on my elbows. Oh yeah? Well, I assure you, it aims to please. Our eyes met, and we became serious once again. One blood moon, and if after this, I still want you, then who am I to deny the princess what she wants? I replied softly. Our eyes met, and she smiled softly. Our silent agreement was made. If she still wanted me after this mating ball, then I will not only tell her how I feel, I make her feel it. But until then, I watched her walk away, not even caring that I was staring at her. She was heaven. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.